Let's get smarter with the help of our lead off panel. Kevin Fry is here, Capitol Hill reporter for MS Now. Jeff Mason, White House and Washington correspondent for Bloomberg. Sam Stein, managing editor for The Bulwark and an MS Now political contributor. And Madame Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker. Kevin, you are back. You are back from Maine, so you're in D.C. sweating. Let's start with Pete Hegseth. What are you expecting today when he asks senators for tens of billions of dollars to pay for this highly unpopular war?
Yeah, I mean, look, Democrats are going to be, shall we say, skeptical as maybe a low bar in terms of what they're going to be overcoming here. They want to know what is the actual cost of this, because some of the estimates we've seen have been considered lowballing, especially since they seem to not be taking into account rebuilding military bases and other assets in the region. But they also mainly want to know what exactly is the off-ramp here, because we have now seen this escalate once again in just the last few days, and there is concern that this is going to become an endless boondoggle in the Middle East. We will see what Republicans exactly press him on. This is obviously one of the first times that they've had a chance to talk to him in front of the cameras in several weeks, in fact, I think months at this stage. And so trying to get clarity for them about what to expect as we head into midterm season and how they're going to be defending this on the campaign trail, and perhaps also getting, as we were talking to one senator just yesterday, a Republican, kind of a sense of, okay, what is the game plan when it comes to the fact that this is now amping up again? Iran doesn't seem to be, in their view, a fair negotiator. So is this going to have to escalate before it can end, as one kind of more or less hinted at us? We will see exactly where all these questions go, but just in terms of the game board here on Capitol Hill, they are rushing to try to pass this extra funding, at least Republicans are, but the processes aren't really lining up. You've got Republicans on the House side trying to do this alone. The Republicans on the Senate side don't think a reconciliation process is going to work, and so how do you mesh those two? And also the August recess is right around the corner.
Okay, well then, speaking about games, I want to know what one Pete Hegseth is going to play today, Sam. Obviously, when Trump officials are testifying on the Hill, they are playing to an audience of one, Donald Trump himself. But in this case, won't it be a huge political liability if Hegseth goes all in on this war, defending it because that's what Trump wants? Because you're hard-pressed to find almost any member of Congress who agrees with that.
Yeah, and I think the real difficulty right now for Republicans, and you're starting to see it in a little bit of the conservative commentary, is that Trump for weeks has said that the Iranian military has been completely degraded, that the defenses have been degraded, that this bombing campaign that we've re-engaged in over the past 10 days has done wonders. And yet simultaneously, we're seeing obviously that the Iranians can hit ships through the Strait. They can hit our bases in Jordan. And so it begs the obvious question, well, if you're saying that they're degraded, how is this still happening? And frankly, I'm not sure there's a great answer for that. On top of that, obviously, everyone's very anxious about what's going to happen with respect to the diplomatic channels. I know that this has been played a little bit on the airways prior to this, but last night on Fox News, Laura Ingraham was saying, hey, the midterms are coming up right around the corner. This war is deeply unpopular. We have to find a way out of it. But what is that way out? Hegseth is not known for being diplomatic, nor has he tried to be diplomatic. He's reportedly one of the voices who's urging Trump to go all in. But there are a lot of political pressures on the Hill to get this resolved, especially as gas prices are rising yet again because the Strait's traffic is more or less stopped.
Susan, weigh in on that. It's not just Laura Ingraham over at Fox News. Brit Hume also just said that Donald Trump promised to keep us out of endless wars, and now he's got us in one. That's saying something. When you hear folks over there, they clearly sound frustrated by the position we're in.
Yeah, Steph, it's really remarkable to listen to those clips from a decade ago today. Certainly, it's been, a heck of a decade. But I think if you asked almost anyone, certainly for myself, one of the biggest surprises, you have to say, of Trump's second term is the idea that the guy who campaigned not only in 2016 and in 2020, but in 2024 on the idea that he was going to keep the United States out of endless wars and that, in fact, you needed to reelect him because Democrats were the party of war. For him to have embarked on a war of choice in the Middle East against Iran in an open-ended way that we now see has entangled the United States with no clear prospects of exiting, that is genuinely, I would say, a big and an unwelcome political surprise. It is fracturing a Republican Party that already was very divided, in particular over foreign policy. And it's a coalition that, of course, is still terrified of acting too decisively against Trump, right? For all of the qualms of certain senators and House members, we haven't exactly seen them stand up and really vote in an aggressive and consistent way against him up until this point. And so it's that abdication of Congress in some ways that's fueling Trump's expanded powers to do whatever he wants here. But I did note the use of the Q word today in a quote that Politico had. It's the first time I've seen a Republican ally of Trump using the Q word quagmire for what's happened here. And I do think should pay attention to what the analysts who understand Iran are saying right now. What they're saying right now is that it's just simply not in Iran's interest, any kind of a long-term deal that would cede in any way their authority over the Strait of Hormuz. In that situation, I think we're going to see a lot more iterations of this. It's not just going to go away with a wave of Donald Trump's magic wand.
Well, what puts Donald Trump and Republicans and the country in the quagmire that you speak of is the economic pain that this war is costing. Jeff, even if the president publicly dismisses it, that's the big issue for him. And now it looks like the Houthis are going to make things worse. Does that change things for the White House?
Well, and you know that even if he dismisses it, Steph, that it's a concern of his, because he has said out loud a handful of times that he doesn't want to be a president who presides over a Great Depression. That's the Exhibit A big concern in the back of his head, that the economic ramifications of this war and of these actions that the U.S. has taken along with Israel could lead to economic pain for Americans that would go longer than just the short-term impact that he has also promised. It's also very interesting to see how his rhetoric has changed. Only a few weeks ago, he was talking about a deal and Iran wanting a deal and the fact that this was over. And now, of course, the attacks are continuing between both sides, and you're not hearing him talk as much about the economics. I asked him in the Oval Office last week about how long this war would go, and he returned to his answer that he had been using earlier in the year about how previous wars have been much longer, the Vietnam War, for example, the Afghanistan War. And that, I think, is a window into his thinking again, that he's gone back to comparing this to previous conflicts and not seeing it as a huge issue if it goes on a little bit longer. But the political ramifications of that do not match up with that, at least suggestion that he's not concerned.
Kevin, Israel matters to this White House. Israel matters to a lot of members of Congress. Today, Lebanon's president is expected to push Trump to get Israel out of Lebanon. Is there a check on where the Trump-Netanyahu relationship stands?
In terms of here on Capitol Hill, I would say probably not, at least from the Republicans right now. They still are largely in lockstep with Israel. The one thing that I would also say, to kind of expand upon what Susan was noting, is that there isn't a lot of appetite right now to put much of a check on the White House, at least not publicly, when it comes to the state of this conflict or the larger situation in the Middle East. I mean, they've basically decided that this 90-day clock that the president has under the War Powers Act of 1973 has restarted because there was a ceasefire. Most of the Republicans I've been talking to have bought onto that agreement. Now, not everyone is keen to that argument. Congressman Massey, for example, says it's like you play an entire Super Bowl, then you take a break and you say, I didn't like the score, so let me start over again. It's not how that works. But so far, there isn't an appetite, a desire to put some sort of check, whether it be a war powers declaration, whether it be an AUMF on this conflict. And so Democrats are now kind of scrambling to try to find another way to try to put guardrails, whether it be through the annual defense bill or through these appropriations processes that we were just talking about.
Before we go, Susan, just a minute ago, we played part of Donald Trump's RNC acceptance speech from 10 years ago. He definitely looked younger and healthier, which that could be said of all of us. But let's talk about policy. Let's talk about content. Looking at how things are now, what is your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump, as you said, did definitely look younger and healthier, but more to the point, he looked more...
But that's all of us.
Right. Well, I mean, we're, thank goodness, not yet in our 80s and not yet charged with, we're not charged with running the free world. And I think the point that's relevant, Steph, is about the cogency of what Donald Trump was trying to say. In 2016, he campaigned on what he called a Make America Great Again thing, but it actually had a pretty clear sort of agenda. Right now, the increasing incoherence and inability to define a coherent ideology of Trump's second term is because he's reinvented the Republican Party to a large degree around the quirks of his own personality and his own desires. That's even more the case now than it was in 2016. And that's why it makes no sense that the president of No New Wars starts a new war in the Middle East. He's asked Republicans to abandon many facets of their own party's core beliefs in order to go after him. I was really struck today. What is Trumpism right now? It's three things, according to a Trump ally. It's pass the Save America Act, i.e. basically claim that all elections are rigged. That's number one. It's number two, let me reinvent Washington, D.C. And build big new monuments in my own name and, change the face of the Capitol. And then number three, pretend that Democrats are crazy and that they are somehow communists and out of control wild people. And let me use the federal government to get revenge on my enemies. That's a pretty hard thing to sell to the American people. Even Republicans might have a hard time subscribing to that as the ideology of their party.